Hey everyone. Everyone full from lunch, ready to learn about some Django forms, modern Django forms. That's right. I'll wake you up after you want to go to sleep with a nap. Like I said, like he said, my name is Josh. I'm the senior web developer at the Westervelt company. I've been a professional web developer for about 4.5 years, so not too long enough. Like I said, I work at the Westervelt company. We're a lumberland company. We own a bunch of timberlands. We own land and try to use it in a responsible way. And Django's a big part of that. We have a lease application that manages our hunting leases, among many other things. There are links. We have our main website and then our GitHub profile where we actually have a bunch of open source Django libraries, mainly for my sake, so I don't have to keep on rewriting things over and over again, but hopefully maybe something y'all will find useful. Okay, so what are forms? What are forms? That's what we're going to talk about today. Well, as far as HTML is concerned in the web, they're one of only two elements that actually kind of can interact with a server built into the platform, the other one being an anchor tag. Forms are the only ones that actually take user input and allow a server to respond. So what are forms? But what are forms in Django? Well, they're primarily a data sanitation and validation and presentation layer. They kind of play a dual role, and it's kind of why they're so complicated. They take user input, sanitize it, make sure it's safe to store, or it matches certain validation rules, and then also presents the form to the users for them to interact with. First question is, how long have forms been in Django? Does anyone know? I know some old graybeards down here know. Well, the answer is pretty much since the beginning. I went back and found it's the second public commit on the GitHub repo made by Adrian. There's the link, the actual link to the commit, and then the permalink to the Django core form fields. That's what they were called. Then this is the only public link I could find of them. Before that, it was in a SVN repository, I think. I was talking with Jacob Kaplan-Moss, and he said pretty much since the beginning, forms have been in Django because they're such an important part of the web. Here's a few kind of notable changes to Django forms over the years, and I just kind of combed the release notes. In 0.95, that's kind of the first available release on GitHub. The forms were included in 2006. In 2007, something called Django New Forms, which is actually the Django forms we know today, pretty much. 1.6 added GeoDjango form widgets. 1.7 was a big form validation release. Form.addError was added then, and just a bunch of validation stuff in that. 1.11 in 2017 added template-based widget rendering. And then there was kind of a wide gap between major features to the form library up until 2021 and 4.0 when we got actually template-based form rendering. So previously it was just widgets, and in 4.0 the entire form library was rendered by a Django template language. It also introduced the form renderer class that was responsible for that. 4.1 brought the div-based form templates, as well as being able to customize your form template name, your default template on your form renderer, and then 5.0 brought as-filled group, which we'll get into later. I put on my data science hat to do this. This is kind of a count of the commits over the years since 2005 up to this year, kind of showing you the different modules, main modules. We got contrib, admin, we got auth, sessions, cord, DB is in there, and the forms is kind of right there in the middle. You can kind of see it's never been the most popular thing to contribute to, but it's kind of just always been there and just kind of always in the background. You can also see, I know this is hard to read. There's new forms and old forms are down there as well, as a reference to where they came from. Okay, so what parts make up Django forms? Well, these are kind of the core bits. We got, the form is kind of the central piece of the puzzle. It's responsible for your validation and your rendering of just all the fields on the form. Your form set is just multiple form instances. And is it a pain to deal with, which I will not be going into. Fields are forms, but just on a single field level. They're responsible for validation and rendering of a single field. The widget is the thing that actually renders the input to the users. Your bound field is a combination of field and data, and that's either the user-created data, user-supplied data, or the initial data that you give it when you instantiate it. And then there's also error list and error dict, and those just kind of handle all the errors in your form and associated field with the errors that go along with it. To me, when I was learning Django, this kind of all seemed like a humongous puzzle. It doesn't seem like a lot, but how they fit together in the different layers can make you kind of feel like this when you're going through it. And I feel like that, and I've been preparing for this talk for a while. I still feel like that because forms are complicated. So the form library is kind of complicated, but it's complicated to hopefully save us time when we're building our Django apps. Okay, so now we're going to go through and talk about a little bit about leveling up your Django forms with a couple modern additions, new additions. We're going to go through 4 levels. First up, this is an easy one. Use the platform that we all use, the web platform. What does this mean? Of course, it's all the input types that we kind of just get out of the box with HTML. You type number, email, URL, and password. Those are kind of some of the most common ones. And how that looks is, everyone knows this. You have a number field. You can't. I'm typing in letters. It's not letting me. No JavaScript. No nothing. It will let me do numbers. Same for email. It'll validate that it's a valid email. URL, same thing. And a password will mask. So Jim from accounting can't spy on your password. And how this looks, of course, in Django is pretty simple. We have our form widgets, and there's a number input, email input, URL input, and password input. And if you use model forms, they come out by default with the integer field. You do have to specify localize equals false. Otherwise, it renders to a text input. But if you specify that, then you get a number input just provided by the library. There's also a handful of less commonly used or less commonly known. I feel like I rarely see these. Your color, your search, and your telephone input types. And how you would use them in Django is similar to how you would define a custom widget. And that is inheriting from widgets.input and specifying the different input types for color, for search, for tel. And this, interestingly, this stuff is coming in the next release, I believe, Django 5.2. I think I copied this directly from main when I was creating these slides, but you can use these today. And how they look is like this. You get a color input with a nice wide gamut of all the different colors that you can choose. And it's platform specific. So if I pulled this up on my phone, it would render the actual iOS color input. Same for search. And for tel, it'll bring up the number pad and a list of local numbers that you're using. Oops. There's also date input types. Those are a little bit trickier because in HTML they have no time zone data, and well, we have to handle time zone data, otherwise we get those weird bugs. There are a handful of track tickets on the Django ticket tracker discussing this, and it's been brought up that maybe Django should have this built in to the form library. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I mean, it's you got to handle the time zone somehow, but if you wanted to do it yourself, this is how you would do it, and then you get your nice little date picker without any JavaScript. That's going to be a theme. I threw this in at the last minute. Does anybody know the CSS property has? It's kind of been around for a little bit, but it's been broadly available this year. Is anyone familiar with it, used it? Yeah, has is great. I'm not going to go into any detail beyond acknowledging the potential of it, especially within the Django Forms library, where you perhaps want to act on a custom widget that you don't want to copy that custom widget template into your own project, because then you got to maintain it. You got to think about it later on when a library updates it. You got to update it yourself. Has allows you to style a parent element based on a child element's attributes, anything, state, data attributes. So I've just begun to play with Has, and I encourage you to as well. So that's use the platform. That's level 1. Level 2 is the as field group introduced in Django 5.0. And that allows you to define custom templates for your Django fields. You can do it a couple different ways. You can do it as a attribute, a passed-in attribute, a passed-in variable to your, when you define your Django field template name. You can also do it at the request level and have it render a different template. You can also do it at the form renderer level and have a global custom field template to rule them all. And then your form template, you have to adjust it a little bit. You have to call your form.field.asField group, but that's all you got to do. And then depending on how you define that template name, the template just works. So that's field as field group. Next up is form render, and it's what as field group is for forms, and it's defined very similar. You can define a custom template name on a form, on a request, and at the template level, the form renderer level. You can also set a global form renderer to a custom one. I would generally not advise this. This is the way I did it at the beginning of the year, and you can ask Jeff Triplett. He has had many headaches because of that decision. This is a big hammer, and you should wield it responsibly. If you change something in this template, it's going to apply to not only any form that your application is using, it's going to apply to any third party that's relying on the form template library, the form rendering library. I made a change to add a required asterisk, a little red asterisk to help my users out, and I started seeing red asterisks everywhere in the debug toolbar and the admin. Everything uses this. So if you do this, use it responsibly. So that's form renderer. Next up, the last one is maybe don't use Django forms, and I'm obviously being a little facetious there. Maybe don't use Django forms only. And this is probably a pretty common practice. We have a bunch of awesome third-party libraries. Django Crispy Forms obviously is the most popular one. There's Django Widget Tweaks as probably equally as popular. There's an interesting one that I've been wanting to play with, Django Form Set. It is kind of a rethink of the Django template library and does it in its own way, and it allows for grouped fields and grouped form sets. Super interesting. There's also some template-based component libraries. Carlton's Django template partials is great, and you're going to see some later. I know Django components and slippers are both two very popular template rendering libraries. I wanted to bring attention to Django Cotton. That's kind of a brand new one. As of, I believe, 9 months ago. It kind of reimagines what Django templates can look like. Instead of using your curly braces and your percent signs and your typical Django template goodies, you instead use that in a cotton input.html in there. You use all your familiar Django template variables and control methods, and then in your actual template, use this kind of funny syntax that kind of makes it look like a custom custom web element. C-input. You can have slots, default variables like the type text or a leading icon and a trailing icon, and so you end up kind of getting a nice little form input right down there with the deleting icon. Okay, so those are the 4 levels. Use the platform, use the inputs, use CSS. CSS is great, and it's getting better every day. The field is field group. We got our form renderer, and then all the additional third-party libraries provided by the Django ecosystem. Okay, so let's go ahead and build something with all this kind of knowledge that we've just gained. I'll show you what we're going to build. We're going to build a password reset form, deceptively complicated. So we're going to have a current password, obviously. We're going to have a new password with a validation. And then we're also going to have a toggle to display change between type password and type text. And so how that looks, everyone's seen this. Everyone's seen a password reset form, except this one has inline validation using HTMX. If I do this, I got 1, 2, 3. That's a numeric password. I go away. It validates against my password validation rules in my Django project. Yeah, so that's what it's going to look like at the end. It's got field required as well. No refreshing, no JavaScript, minus a handful of libraries. I do want to add a disclaimer. I built like 90% of this, and then I realized it has a humongous security bug, which I'm sure someone will point out to me and make fun of me later. So don't use this, please. This is just an illustrative purpose, kind of give you an idea of the different APIs that are now available to the forms library. The form library was pretty static for a while. And then within the past year, there's got a new life. There are new APIs, new goodies to play with. And I also say, like, the reason for the title of this talk is this is an opinionated guide. This is just one way to build a form like this. It's not necessarily one I would agree with in 4 months. Like I said, these APIs and these techniques are kind of newish, and we're just trying to feel our way out, find the right abstractions, find the right patterns. Okay, so let's get started. We need our current password, new password 1, new password 2. We're just going to start out with char fields, define the form, use the generic form view, create our template. Boom, we're done, right? This is it. We got our password reset, except, like I said, if Jim from accounting comes across and he's going to capture your password. So let's go ahead and use the platform. Use those custom widgets, forms.password input. That'll set that input type to type password. And then Jim doesn't know anything. Okay. Except it's kind of looking a little plain. Let's jazz it up. People like to use nice looking inputs and forms. So let's jazz it up a little bit. Let's create a custom password field. Go ahead and inherit that, or add the forms.password input widget as our custom widget. And then we'll go ahead and say if we don't pass in a template name when instantiating the field, we'll go ahead and set a default one. This kind of allows us to adjust it later if we like. And then that custom widget template kind of looks like this, a standard Django widget template. We got our field.label with some nice little Tailwind CSS. We got our field errors, we got our actual field, and the help text. Everyone knows this. So then we change our char fields to our custom password field. And then we're going to go ahead and add some nice different Tailwind styles to the input, make it look nice, give it a nice placeholder, a nice border when it's highlighted, when it's focused, excuse me. And now we're going to go ahead and adjust our submit button as well, make it look nice as well. Now this is a form. This is what I'm talking about. Now this I can use every day. Except I don't really like new password 1, new password 2. That doesn't make sense. Those form fields go together. They're kind of a form group. It doesn't rub me right. So we're going to change that. We're going to go ahead and set the labels to be default as blank strings. Get rid of them, throw them out of here. And then we're going to call our as field group. We're going to go ahead and keep the current password the same. That one was fine for now. And then we're going to create a new field set with a legend of new password, and that's going to be the label. And then we're going to use a grid and do our new password 1 and 2 as field group. And now look, grouped together. This looks nice. This looks nice, usable, logical. It makes sense that they're together. Except I don't remember what I just typed. Now, is that my current password? I don't remember. Wouldn't it be nice if we had like a toggle to go between, nice little eye icon to make sure I knew that I was typing the right password. So we'll change our template, our widget template to a custom widget template at password input. Then this one starts to get a little hairy. I hope you guys can follow. I'm going to do my best to explain it. We're using Alpine.js. It's a nice little simple JavaScript library for adding attributes to an HTML element that give it the nice interactivity that we all like with modern applications, and you get to brag that you don't actually write any JavaScript. You just rely on a library. And so we're going to start by setting the outside container with an X data of hidden equals true. And so that means if it's hidden, it's a password input. If it's not hidden, we're just going to change it to a text input and make sure we can actually see it. So we make sure we typed in the right password. So we'll go down and we'll actually show the actual input. We're going to do a bind, is what in Alpine speak is what you call that colon. We're going to bind the type to the hidden variable that we just set right here. So if it's hidden, we're going to set the input type as password. Otherwise, if it's not hidden, we're going to change it to text. And I believe those classes have not changed, so we'll move on. And then we're going to add our button on the edge. And we're going to say when we click it, we're going to toggle between the two different states, hidden or not hidden. We're going to use Adam Johnson's excellent Heroicon's template library, icon library. And depending on whether it's hidden or not, we're going to show an eye with a slash to it or just the open eye. And that X show is doing that right there. And so that's kind of how it all looks put together. Yeah, so how we doing? Yeah, I'm liking this. This is feeling pretty good. I'm feeling like I can really change my password a lot of times now. That was a little scary. Now we're going to really get to the hairy parts. And I'm going to lean on Luke Plant's excellent Django HTML patterns repository, not only talking about forms, but it's got a bunch of patterns that we can use in our Django applications when using HTMX. And this, what I'm about to show you is kind of inspired by there's a form validation documentation in there. It's kind of inspired by that. Well, first up, we need to pop those field groups out as a template partial because we're going to do some inline validation. So we're going to load our Django template partials. We're going to define the field partial up there. And if you've never used HTMX, this is a lot of variables or a lot of attributes, but it's pretty easy to follow. Like the hx get just means we're going to issue a get to the current URL when this is triggered. We're going to pass in the field name as the validate field in the request. We're going to make sure to trigger it from a custom event password blur, which we'll get to in the next slide. And we're going to save the password blur event from the container, the widget container, we're going to include the entire input. We're going to target this specific field partial template, and then we're going to use the morphdom morphdom HTMX extension because it handles, since we're using inputs and we're going to have focus states, the morphdom library, the morphdom HTMX extension, handles that focus state pretty well. Okay, so then down in our form, we just kind of swap the as field group and use the Django template partials, Django partial templates that we just defined using those field. And then here's where it gets a little scary. Previously, we just had hidden true because we have an input with a text input and a button that's going to toggle between password and text. Well, we got to figure out how to handle that. We couldn't just use if the text input loses focus, because then when we tab to the hidden button, it would validate and lose our focus and throw the user off. So we're going to handle that somehow. So we're going to set a new variable, has focus. We're going to set it to false, and then we're going to have a handler that basically says, if we lose focus, trigger dispatch this custom event password blur. And then on the two inputs, the input and the button, we're going to do the XON event, and we're going to say if we focus on the input or the button, it's true. And if we blur or we go away from the input, we're going to set the focus as false. And then on the next tick, the next rendering cycle, we're going to go ahead and call that handler. And if both our inputs, if our input and our button have both lost focus, then we'll just trigger that, dispatch that event. We do need to adjust our form view, though. As a reminder, this is what it looked like. Very simple. It's about to get more complicated. We're going to override the get method, and we're going to check if the request is an HTMX request using Adam Johnson's Django HTMX package. We're also going to check for the get request for that validate field variable that we set in the request. And if we have both those things, we know we're trying to validate that specific input. So we're going to pass it into the form class. We're going to check if it's valid. And then we're going to get the bound field from the form clean data. And then we're going to render the form using a custom template with the partial, using the fragment, the hash, the number sign. We're going to target that template partial that we defined earlier, the field partial. I know that's a lot to follow, especially in talk slides, but basically it just means that if I focus on this, it's fine, but if I go away, field is required. It's doing that inline validation. But if I type something, go away, it says it's valid. And if I go away like that, and kind of just go around, pop around, and it just kind of just works. It's a little bit hairy to get there, but it just kind of works. And still no lines of JavaScript that we have written personally. Okay, so that was kind of the hard part. Now we're going to kind of spice it up a little bit or put some sugar on top. Let's check if the current password that is given to us matches what the user's password is. Since this is a talk demo, I'm just going to hard code it to DCUS 2024, just so we can prove that it works. And that's all it takes is just on the form overriding the clean current password method. And if it doesn't match, we'll return a validation or raise a validation error. And now if I don't type, you can see not DCUS 2024 does not match current password. That's just what we want. But if I type in 2024, we're all good. We're all good. Okay, I believe this is the last step. I'm liking where we're going so far. However, on the new password, as a user, I don't know what expectations we have. So let's add some help text as well. So we're going to import from Django contrib auth, the password validation module. And then set the help text to the password validator's help text HTML. And then also throw a new clean method for a new password, grab it from the clean data, and pass it through the password validation. And so now this is great as a user. I know exactly what to expect. Except if I do a single number, it comes back, with my validation inline. I think that is it. Yep. So I'm going to stop there, mainly because I ran out of time. But there are plenty of ways we can just keep on iterating on this. Like instead of the help text, instead of the validation text being on the top, we could try to swap the help text in place, and so you know exactly which ones you have yet to do. You can add a progress bar to see how long it is, how close to 8 characters you are. Kind of the mine reels. And so that's it. That's my talk. I think I went a little too fast. I was excited. I'm excited. This stuff gets me excited. Yeah, that's kind of it. I can make more slides up, but it's like, y'all don't want to sit there and watch that. So the talk slides will be on my personal website later today. I was busy building those forms to do that. So that QR code actually doesn't even work, but it'll be there. joshthomas.dev/talks. You can find me on the different places. There's my personal website. I'm also on GitHub, and I have a Mastodon, and I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm giving it a try. So that's it.
How long it took you to find the commit in the slide?
Probably 20, 30 minutes. Like, I can't even remember. I started by clicking back a couple times on GitHub, and that didn't work. And I think I wrote a small little script and using Git, and just find me the oldest commit on here. The first commit is actually documentation. The actual code comes from the second public commit. Who knew?
Yeah.
All right, this one comes from an online attendee. It says, I'm curious, Josh. In your example, you were building a form from scratch. Was that for demo purposes, or have you run into trouble integrating these techniques into the Django pre-built form classes in the past?
I mean, it was mainly for the talk purposes, for demonstration purposes, kind of to show you beginning to end. You wouldn't do all those kind of steps. I don't do all those steps, but I was trying to do my best to show the as field group, being able to customize the rendering kind of throughout it. Like, no, you're not going to use that for every single form, every single application, but it's there, and it's not too bad, and it's getting better. It's getting better every release.
Thank you very much. You mentioned libraries by Adam Johnson, Luke Plant. So it sounds like you have at your disposal a toolbox of different components. What was the experience of integrating them as a unified pieces of software that seem to think in the same way?
Well, that's a good question. It just depends on what layer in the application they're kind of working with. Django template partials and DjangoCon, for example, both use custom template loaders. So getting that integrated together, getting it in the right order. Luckily, both libraries are very excellent and they have good maintainers. And they have good escape hatches. Like they offer automatic setup of the template loaders for ease of use, but also have escape hatches for manually setting all that up. So it kind of just depends on, like those are two specific template loader libraries. But if you're using like Django HTMX and DjangoCon or Django template partials or Django widget tweaks, like those are taking care of two different things. So I've yet to run into major issues. Just kind of depends.
Yeah, you didn't have
depends.
You didn't have problems with them fighting with each other at any point. So
No, not really.
Sounds like a really good experience.
Yeah, I mean it was a pretty painless, pretty seamless, and hopefully a nice user experience as well.
So my question comes from the use of regular or just custom style sheets. Say you want to venture away from CSS frameworks. What would you actually recommend to implement something like that? You know, would you use your typical or like a different package, or would you just use raw Django?
Are you talking, so let me repeat the question back just so I understand. You're talking about moving away from CSS entirely or using
I'm just talking about not using something like Bootstrap or Tailwind and using purely CSS and implementing your own.
I'm the
like,
wrong
style
person to
sheets.
ask.
Yeah.
I'm deep on Tailwind. I love Tailwind. It helps me write CSS these days, and it's extendable. It's getting fast. A pattern I like with Tailwind now is to still fall back to CSS defined in a CSS file, but have Tailwind process it. So you can still access your theme, your nice design package. That's kind of the utility classes are a nice addition, but really the theme, the design patterns, especially as someone who is design challenged, I like leaning on that. I tend to just stick with that and not fall back to raw CSS. But I mean, raw CSS is great these days. And it's, like I said, it's getting better. It has just came out. There are container queries. I mean, the list goes on and on. You don't even need SAS or SCSS these days, really. So I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry. I'm all in on Tailwind, so that's the answer. That's the answer. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, well, thank you, Josh, and big round of applause, please.
Thank you.